want you to take a good, honest look at your life, and I want you to ask yourself, are you happy with where you are? Wherever you are in life right now, whether it's good or bad, and whether you're happy with it or not, is your fault. Mostly. The position you find yourself in, the job you may be at, your significant other you might have, the school you went to, what you do with your free time, how much money you make, and how you choose to spend your time, all comes back to, guess what? Your choices. Now I'm gonna put that disclaimer out there, of course, and sometimes, yeah, we get blindsided by random shit. Car accidents, losing jobs, unexpected death, anything is fair game in life. But for the most part, the decisions you've made have led you to right exactly where you are. You're happy with most of the aspects of your life. You should be high-fiving yourself and be proud of yourself. Maybe you did get a few lucky breaks, but hey, most of luck is being what? Right place, right time, right? Now, if you're dissatisfied or extremely dissatisfied with your situation, most likely you are to blame for your own situation. The decisions you've made have put you right where you are. Now, sometimes I get it. If you're young enough, your parents have huge influence. If you're a 15-year-old, there's not a whole lot you can do. But if you're in your 20s and onward, pretty much every decision in every aspect of your life is gonna be on you. I mean, really, who else would it be on? So if you're dissatisfied with your situation, it may be annoying in this moment and just suck, but it may also be slightly liberating to know that you also have the power to make choices and get yourself out of that situation. I'm not going to sit here and say it's all sunshine and roses trying to get yourself out of the hole you dug, but the other side of the coin is you have the power to change it, almost no matter what the situation is. If you're in jail and you got 15 years to go, that's kind of tough to change. You can try and make the best of it, but most likely the decisions you made put yourself in that position. Most likely. So if you're in that crappy situation and it feels like it's overwhelming, maybe it feels like it's even impossible to get out of. Just know that most of the time when you dig a hole that's pretty deep, the bigger the hole you dug, the longer it's going to take for you to resurface. But just know that if you start inching away at the top instead of continuing to dig yourself down, you can and eventually will make it to the top. It would just be a matter of time, assuming you stay on the path constantly. Some things in life are permanent. For example, if you're in your 50s and you were smoking most of your life, that's going to have a pretty serious impact on your long-term health. That damage is permanent, and all you can do is make the best of what you have left. Quitting smoking right now, at 52 years old, would have a good impact rather than continuing to smoke into your 60s, should you make it that far. However, some things are just temporary. Some people have enormous levels of debt. Money is temporary. If you chip away at whatever debt you have, you will eventually be able to pay it off and get back to the surface and out of the hole of debt. Now, if you're only throwing $1 a day at it, and maybe you literally are inching out of the hole, it'll take a very long time. But if you start piling money into the debt and paying it off, at some point, you'll get there much quicker, just depending on how big the hole is. Also, when the hole is big enough, sometimes the surface seems so far away that it's not even worth it. What's the solution? To continue to dig yourself into the hole even deeper? That's how you got there in the first place, right? You only have so much time in life. Wouldn't you rather spend what little time we have on Earth not in a giant hole of defeat and debt and whatever else you may have found yourself in? The only person who can change it is you, and only you can get yourself out of the hole. For women, it might be slightly different because you can just show boobs usually, but as men, we don't have that. I mean, I guess I could show my boobs, but I just have they'll just get a really hairy chest. And most people probably won't pay for that. For guys, we generally don't have an out like that. The moral of the story is that you're responsible for your actions. I know we all heard that phrase growing up in like first and second grade, and then we didn't really hear much about it after. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for everything that happens in your life. Again, for the most part. Almost everything good, almost everything bad that happens to you is a result of your choices. And therefore, you're responsible for it. Good or bad. By taking responsibility for all of your actions. The life that you're bound to live if you don't take responsibility for your actions is a tortured one. And it's really not natural to us because it's really not emphasized in society enough. If you're lucky enough to have lived in a household with parents who drove that home from a young age into your head, and that was just the natural byproduct of you being a kid in their house, you're very lucky, and that's totally the exception. I came from a pretty good house myself, 2 parents, good schools, but even with them, they didn't really emphasize that point that everything that happens in my life is my fault. And that's me coming from a pretty good background. So when we look at families which are a little bit more dysfunctional, maybe there's only one parent, and they have the philosophy that life just happens, and that they're the victims of whatever happens in life, and they take no responsibility for their actions, and they blame everything on external factors, that's going to be a tortured life. And even though I'm suffering the consequences of it, it's not my fault, and there's nothing I can do about it, which is usually total bullshit. There's usually not contradictions in life, and you can usually do something about the situation you're in. Maybe it's something you don't want to do, but there's something you can do about it. Almost always. Getting that shovel isn't always fun. Maybe for you need to lose some weight, or maybe you're just terrified to go talk to women, and you haven't had a girlfriend in a few years, or ever. Trying to rip that band-aid off and improve your situation, even though you can do it sometimes seems like an almost paralyzing task. But at the end of the day, it's still your choice. Even though it might seem paralyzing and really difficult, by not choosing to improve it, by choosing to be afraid of the solution or face it directly, you're continuing to dig yourself in that hole of misery and allowing it to get deeper. Remember, it just keeps getting deeper, and it's not going to get better until you choose to change it, even if it's very uncomfortable. So the next time you walk by someone who's hot, or you think about spending $40 on something that you don't think you need to, just remember, by not taking the action you need to and pointing towards true north or where you need to go, you're doing yourself a massive disservice and continuing to dig your own hole. Which, who knows, if you dig long enough and hard enough, may end up just being your grave, sadly. Either way, life is pretty much what you make it, and it's basically the summation of the choices that you make. Only you have the power to stop your own bad habits or continue your great habit. Of course, I'll just say this, once you're making great habits and great decisions in most areas of your life, it's not so much that it's addicting or that the momentum keeps going and it's easy. It's that there's no other choice. You don't see how you could do any of those bad decisions because you know that the path you're on is exactly where you want to go. The other small side of the coin is, even if you're making all the best decisions for your life and someone's choosing to make all those bad decisions for their lives, it's complete and total bullshit when you are forced by the government or forced by someone else to step in and remedy their poor choices after you've done everything in your power to do the best for you, and they get to reap the rewards of what you've sown and also continue to make bad decisions because they know that the good decisions that you make will trickle down to them. Now, of course, that's on a macro scale, but it's still fucking bullshit. And it probably won't be in my lifetime, but maybe in a few hundred years, or maybe even 1,000 years, they'll stop finally subsidizing retarded choices by others and taking away the fruits from the people that have actually worked for what they have and giving them to the people who are going to squander them and continue to drag down themselves. This is a pretty deep topic, and it seems like you can go on the philosophy about it on YouTube without a problem, but the second you start talking about it in the terms of reality and society, kind of like I just did on the government, YouTube loves to throw stuff like that into the shadow ban trash can. So it's a wonder that nobody's really thinking of it in those terms, or generally people aren't, and they just continue to be unaware in their own plugged in states, you know. The moral of the story is to make good choices, and depending on how big of a hole you've dug yourself, you're probably not going to be able to change them overnight. Some situations we've made for ourselves are pretty bad, but as an example of how you can kind of ease into trying to help it, or at least trying to stop the bleeding of how big the hole is, I remember when I was 19 years old and I couldn't cook my way out of a paper bag. I mean, I was fucking terrified of even turning the stove on. I read something on Reddit which was really encouraging, and it told me to go to the stove, put some fucking water in a pot, and to turn on the boiler and get the water boiling, and then put it in the sink and be finished. So that way I could overcome the fear and paralysis of having no fucking clue how to do anything with a stove, and I could at least say I know how to boil some fucking water. As embarrassing as that is, it's applicable to most things that we've dug for ourselves. Maybe you have 6 figures in debt, and yeah, you're probably not going to make 100 grand in a day, and you're probably not going to be able to pay that off right away. But if you could stop spending all this money on unnecessary stuff, maybe you get like a coffee every day, or maybe you get a coffee 7 days a week, maybe you can dial that back to 5 days a week or 6 days a week, and then gradually get it down to 4 and 3, and all of a sudden you might find yourself getting $8 richer at a time. And over the course of 2 months, if you save, maybe you're only getting coffee twice a week, that's 32, and then you do that for a whole month. 32 times 4 is 128. All of a sudden you're $128 richer by not spending money on stuff you don't necessarily need, right? That's an example. I'm not a coffee guy. If you're a coffee person, it's probably different. That's just an example of how you can dial it back and at least reduce the cost by 2/3. Of course, that's a classic stereotype, but the application is applicable in a lot of things. Maybe you're doing heroin 15 times a week, and instead of doing heroin 15 times a week, you reduce it to 2 times a week, or maybe just 7. Whatever harmful or unnecessary activities you're doing, you can find a way to dial them back. Not cut them out immediately right away, but you can dial them back. It's so funny because when I go to the grocery store and I'm looking at the cookie aisle, I feel zero desire to go eat any of that because I know it's just complete and total sugar. I remember being 19 and even a kid, and I was absolutely craving all those Oreos, and I had such strong like chemical dopamine reactions to those. I'm not sure if it was because of brain development or whatever, but I feel no attachment to it right now whatsoever, and I can walk by it no problem whatsoever now. But back then it was really hard for me to be able to do that, you know? So I get it. At first week or two, it's probably gonna be pretty tough. It's probably gonna be as tough as it gets, right? When you do weightlifting, the first day after you're always the most sore, right? Then you get a little less sore next time, and then you're not sore at all when you're doing it a few times a week, right? That soreness or that hangover or that first time that you cut back is gonna be probably the most brutal time, depending on the severity of the activity you're choosing. Either way, if I could find a way to boil water on my own without making my house explode, you could probably find a way to cut whatever activity it is that you need to.